PowerPoint.
That's the PowerPoint.
Yeah,
You have a June 25th PowerPoint.
right.
Okay. All right. I thought we put both the PowerPoint and the PDF in the box as well.
We have the
There's some older
set.
PDF. Um, yeah.
I guess one question that I have too while we're talking about this is the visibility test, either a flag test or a lumber test, is that something that's scheduled to happen and just couldn't happen before this, or?
Yeah, so we had originally done a flag test already for the property. And this is just accounting for the adjustment to the slope roof and to the transition. So before we set it back all the way to that fourth floor, now it's being lowered and set forward a little bit. So we're just doing a flag test to confirm that visibility.
But that flag test, the new flag test is scheduled, or that's my question.
Yeah, how soon can that happen?
We haven't scheduled it yet. We're still trying to get through this portion here.
Okay.
Oh, but could it happen while this portion is being updated so that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not,
Or not?
we definitely want to do the flag test, and we'll be doing the flag test. We just haven't scheduled it for this week yet.
I guess I have a question if I could. What is the current material of the roof cladding of the turret? Looking at photos, it almost looks like a pressed metal or something, but it's hard to tell.
The turret will be the exact same as it is right now, which is shingles.
Okay, because the way it's rendered, it almost looks like an asphalt shingle, but the way it looks in person, it's white. So I don't know if it's a white painted metal or something
Oh
like
no,
that.
it might be that it's old, but it's shingles at the moment.
Okay, just making sure we're not taking off anything that may be, character defining there.
Of course. But I agree with Mr. Bell. I mean, it's kind of impossible for you guys to determine anything with this plans. I just don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I would suggest sitting with staff and looking at some examples of successful projects that have been submitted and organizing your presentation that way.
It is correct. He is correct. When he sends it to us from his Mac, it flips automatically. When he sends it in a PDF, it shows correctly. And we haven't figured out why it keeps changing back and forth. And so,
But Imani, my problem is not necessarily that. My problem is the way the whole thing is organized. I can't figure out what's going on. I mean, I can see the drawings. The plans are extremely small. The labels are unclear. I don't see a street section. Things are disjointed from each other. I just think the project and the applicant would be well served if they could look at some examples of successful presentations in terms of getting their narrative together. That's my opinion. But
The applicant agreed, so
Yeah, Mr. Bell, I don't disagree with you. I mean, if I were you and I'm looking at the same screen,
yeah, let's not keep wasting time talking about it back and forth. Let's just make the decision that we will have you come back once your drawings are better organized.
Okay.
All right. So we'll
And hopefully
conclude this for today. Yeah, and the flag test. Yeah, thank you, Gretchen.
But if you come back before you've done the flag test, we'd still look at the drawings, I guess. But we prefer to know how much is visible, because you're close.
and there are many projects of this type that have had successful approvals, and I think the staff is well versed in showing you examples of ones you could model your presentation after.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you. We'll see you when you're ready.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. We are ready to move to Walter Reed Historic District to the 7100 block of 13th Street. Is staff ready to present?
Yes, Madam Chair. Good morning. This is Tim Dene for the staff.
Morning.
This new concept is a combination of multifamily buildings and townhouse rows. Although it does provide some green space, the site plan is rather tight, especially where rows of townhouses back up to each other. Among other things, this pushes the utility meters to the fronts of the buildings. The condo buildings resemble projects that the board has seen previously on the campus. They draw their inspiration from the old barracks type ward buildings, one of which still remains, specifically the ganged windows within a system of panels. These panels and the cornice, we think, are sufficient counterpoint to the color and texture of the field brick. The remainder of the exterior walls should be of the same field brick, as was traditionally done on buildings on this campus and generally elsewhere, not to be done in a contrasting color of brick. There's no need for a contrasting base, for instance, and that probably harms the composition by focusing attention on the height and proportion of the base relative to the whole as you go around the building. The same brick should also be carried up the supporting piers to the porches. No further contrast is necessary where the porches stand beside the already contrasting inset window panel ensembles. The porches themselves already contrast by introducing voids to the building. Using the red brick for the piers would visually anchor and incorporate the corners of the buildings. It would also minimize the use of fiber cement panel. And as a practical matter, any eventual deterioration in masonry piers typically becomes visible on the surface, while wood framing that's boxed within fiber cement may eventually be subject to unseen moisture damage. The composition of the condo buildings is generally symmetrical, but the effect is spoiled a bit by the offset entrances. The canopies over the entrances also read as heavy presently. And of course, details are important. As always, we recommend that the porch railings should be welded solid bar stock for its thinner lines, its durability, and its lack of connecting hardware. Now, the townhouses also represent Walter Reed projects that the board has reviewed over the past couple of years. The blind windows on the ends of the townhouses are excessive, I think, as the board has observed in other cases, but more actual openings are welcome. While understanding that there may be a need to terminate cornices at the ends of the townhouse rows, doing so at each of the penthouses on the Muse townhouses does not require carrying a pier and capital treatment across the faces of the penthouses. The penthouses themselves should be recessive and their trim minimal. The panels on the townhouses are more successful on the 4-story facades, not having to be sort of cut by an upper story and a base, or the composition of the row of townhouses that face 13th Street straddles being read as one building or as 5 buildings. If it is intended to read more as one, then it would be better to not try to signal its center by a recess for one unit's entry that is actually off center. Instead, that whole center unit might be projected as a pavilion, which becomes a more appropriate center for a large building. That's sort of our list of observations. Thank you.
Shall I start the presentation now? Is that proper?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Davis.
Good morning and thank you so much. I wonder if you would be kind enough to elevate my architect, Jack Borman, to a panelist status. And would that be possible, please? All right. I'm going to commence, and hopefully he will be elevated. Good morning. My name is Vicki Davis. I'm with Urban Atlantic. I'm part of the Parks at Walter Reed team. You've seen us a number of times, and I'm actually really delighted to be here today because this is one of the final pieces of puzzle to be proposed to you. And we know what great work you have put into making the rest of the campus terrific. And I would strongly encourage all of you to come on out and enjoy the campus as it is. I'm joined today by BKV, our architects, by NVR, our home builder, and by EHT Traceries, Sarah Vonish, who is helping us together with Emily Ide for all of our historic efforts. May we go to the next slide, please? This is a slide that you have seen numerous times, which goes through the design standards and the color palette, and I'm going to spare you the details of this because you have heard it so many times, and go to the next slide, please. I'd like to tell you about where this is on the site, and it is the westernmost portion at the northern part of the site, and it's affectionately called Parcel HK. It is on the west side of the 13th Street right-of-way. And it is important because it is surrounded at the bottom of that right-of-way by the northern entry to Building 1, which you see just at the bottom. It's bordered by Building M, which is below the words Dahlia Street. It's bordered by Building L, which is to be built. Both M and L are to be built buildings, as well as townhouses to the north, all of which you have approved and are all to be built. This is the last piece as a part of that puzzle. There are a couple of things that I think are really important about this site. One, it is proposed to be developed as 97 units. Two, it is consistent with our zoning and building heights and uses the full FAR of the site. Three, the lot size is about 84,000 square feet, so almost 2 acres. The building area is 50,000 square feet. So you can see that we have a 60% lot coverage and the remainder as open space. I think it's very important to know that. The other thing that's important to know is that there is a green area due north of the site, which would have been a road to nowhere, our least favorite kind of roads. And so therefore it's been replaced by a green area. Similarly, 13th Street is characterized by wide sidewalks as well as a green median, and that right-of-way for perspective is 140 feet wide. So it is surrounded by green area, and then additionally on the site itself, we have a significant amount of green space as well as circulation through the site. And with that, I'd like to go to the next slide, please. This is an aerial version looking from the south. So Building 1 is due south of the site. It's a little bit at an angle, this image. L is to the east of it. And then the children's site to be developed, and which has an FAR and a height limit at 90 feet. So you will see that represented as a gray box in this presentation because we've considered their entire envelope for their site just for reference. The buildings that you see there is an actual photograph of the northern edge of building number 1. The building below that is Building M, which you approved, which is along Dahlia Street on the southern side of Dahlia, and Building L, which is to the east of this site. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jack. And I know we have a lot of slides to get through, and we're starting with renderings, and so we're hoping to go through our presentation with you quickly. And I'd also just like to say, we agree with a lot of the recommendations from Tim Dene. We are grateful for his feedback, and we have made an effort at the end of this presentation to also incorporate those. So with that, I'm going to take it to Jack. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. If you could go to the next slide, please. Most important, I think, as the Walter Reed campus is being built out by all the various buildings, is to maintain that relationship and the strength as it relates to Building 1 and the overall campus, and the scale and the relationship that has been so strongly designed into the project master plan. So as you look south to building 1. You have building L on the left and building our new HK building on the right. The key elements here is maintaining a respective height to here at this end of the 13th. You've got the two buildings closer together, and so they relate to each other on height and scale, and that was very important in how we positioned townhouse number 3 here to the right. And then as you look further down 13th, the buildings are further apart, but they're still the same height, and we're bracketing that sort of pedestrian promenade along 13th, both in height and massing. Next slide, please. On the opposite end of 13th, here at Dahlia, you begin to see the real pedestrian sort of relationship. And again, we're developing the building massing to relate L to our new HK condo buildings, and to develop a base building that is not only the watershed base, but the first floor articulation, and then the 3 floors above, and then the overall roof cornice and coping. So that's the relationship between buildings HK condos and building L was a strong driver in the articulation and the materialness of the different contrasting bricks between our new building at HK and then the design that was approved for building L. So that's the history around why we are presenting what we're presenting. We very much appreciate and don't necessarily agree with Tim's point of view. From an isolated building design, I think a lot of the aspects that he's talking about would have been what we would have done as well. But I just wanted to share with the board why we did what we did, which we think works nicely, but we're open to modifications as a part of, because we're really not changing the type of materials, we're just changing the color of the materials. The corner balcony elements in those columns in all brick, we are a little concerned that that adds a heavier corner to the massing, which we like the lighter element, especially on the upper 3 floors. It could be different on the first floor, even if all the brick was the same color. But let's keep going. Next, please. This is a different view of H&L, the building 1 and the entrance. And then as you look down, you look up a Dahlia, you have building M on the left, and then the height and scale of building M with our new HK condos. And again, you can see the relationship to the streetscape and the corners and the articulation for the condo building, which as a condo building will have fairly significant balconies. We also, you can see in this the entry, and we do feel that an entry canopy is important. But again, as a condo, it can be a fairly simple kind of entry element and canopy. The idea of lightening up the canopy and maybe making it black so that it becomes more minimalist is certainly something that we think is a good suggestion. And over here in building L, you can see some portion of the watershed base in the first floor, which were a part of the drivers to create this sort of balance between HK and L on either side of 13th. Next, please. Here we're in much more of a close-up view where we can see the first floor base with the watershed as a contrasting color, and then we're brick all the way up to the second floor, and then the building is primarily brick with the non-brick corners that are large panels of non-brick material. You see the entryway. As you're going up the hill, you're seeing the relationship of the entries and steps and the overall cornice and upper areas. As you look to the left, you're beginning to see condo building 2, which is 4 4-story condos that are stepping up the hill, approximately 8 inches per townhouse as they go up the hill. With individual entrances and railings to develop a strong streetscape residential feel. To the right is you see the second condo building. And then the next slide, please. This is the Dahlia Street view that I was describing earlier with the individual entrances. Strong brick base, a belt line at the second floor, and then the articulated larger windows on floors 2 and 3, and then more of an attic floor expression with a deeper brick coping and frieze area at the top with smaller windows, creating and then more of a living room sort of feature for the 2 outside units where we cluster 6 windows together to give some relief and some articulation to the building mass. But again, simple window patterns, punched windows, except for the 2 living room pieces, living room and main bedroom pieces. So that's kind of the general articulation of the townhouse concept. You go to the next slide, please. This is up at the top side of 13th Street. We call this Condo 3. Similar kind of articulation, where we have our standard first floor articulated. Here we have a 3-story mass, so we have 2 floors and then the attic floor element as part of the articulation, because this is the uphill side of our 4-story, and you see it steps down as we go to the rear where we have the terrace. The suggestion has been that we wrap the brick all the way around and not have the railing. And that's certainly a very amenable suggestion. One of the articulations here that I want to point out, and this shows up in the elevations, is the middle 2 floors, here, the first and second floor, we're articulating around the windows with a 4-inch 1-inch brick projection, and then an 8-inch brick soldier course on the top of the 3rd floor windows to create a brick articulation to this facade that's very subtle. At the 3rd floor, we have the projected brick band with an 8-inch soldier and a 4-inch soldier as well, to create an articulation between the first 2 floors and the top of the building. We are moving the townhouses. This is a 5-row townhouse, and so we are currently articulating a 3-inch recess at the second entry, and this is balanced as you go down. So we tried to, as you can see on the end of the far end, we have a townhouse, a recess entry, and then 2 townhouses together, another recess entry, and then the end townhouse. So that's our way, especially here where we don't have a roof variation. It's all, the building's all one level. So that was part of sort of subtle articulation with the brick masses to help create this 3-story massing within the 5-unit building mass. So as an individual townhome articulation. Next, please. Here are more the streetscape elevations. These are smaller, but you can see how the condo buildings and townhouse 3 are all at the same roof height. And you can also see the articulation as you step down. And that's where the sort of watershed base sort of starts to articulate at Dahlia, because we have basically about a 10 to 12 foot drop from the top end of 13th to the Dahlia end. As you turn and look at Dahlia, you can see here we're stepping from left to right from Dahlia towards Georgia Ave. And you've got here the individual townhomes are articulated, 1st floor base, 2-story middle, and then the top floor with smaller windows and a larger brick sort of attic floor top. The condo building to the right, the same sort of base and 4 floors there, similar to building L, the same height articulation. What you see in the background over at the opposite end of the site is the ghosted in version of the 3rd condo building. And you also see to the right, as 13th narrows, you'll see the end of the townhouse 3. So there's nice articulation of the buildings moving around on the site to to help relate to 13th and Dahlia streetscapes. Next, please. This is just this is the upper is the internal elevation that shows the townhouse 3 on the left, which is the backside, and here we have the 4-story elevation with the entry-level garages, and then the main living kitchen area with the bay windows on the back, and then the upper bedroom windows, and then the terrace. This in this case, we would be extending the end walls so that we have more of a consistent massing on the ends. On the back side, those are non-brick. They're horizontal siding, and we're proposing colors that soften the change in materials so that they work together from a palette standpoint. And they maintain a similar articulation through the painted trim boards to what we're doing in the front. So there's not a huge contrast for that building. Then the elevation on the bottom is it illustrates in the sort of driveway access lanes that are in the project as you would look at the various end elevations. Here we're feeling very comfortable with the recommendation to maintain only blind windows where they're in a fixed pattern with other windows, and if they're in an open wall area, to not have blind window patterns, which makes all the sense in the world. So you go to the next slide, please. This is further to the west, to the east, excuse me. And this illustrates more, again, just how the streetscape and the stepping of the building masses work, and also the end elevations. Then we have our green space here that's in the center of our townhomes clusters that allows 3 of the townhome buildings to share the Muse open space, which will be a very nice common green space feature for the townhouses, which also opens up their sort of feeling on the site from a standpoint of openness. Next, please. These are the elevation details for the condo buildings, which illustrate the same concepts we talked about earlier in the perspectives of streetscapes. Next, please. These are more the technical elevations. If you look at the top elevation, this drawing allows you to see a little bit more how we're articulating with the projected brick border bands around the windows at the entry level and the second floor, and then the horizontal soldier course band that sets off the top floor of the building, and obviously the watershed base where we have the entryways. So we felt there was nice articulation to the building masses in brick, so that they have interest, but there's still, it's subjected to the overall pattern of windows and the building massing that's very simple and repetitive. So the end elevation, back elevation, as you can see, we're trying to maintain some of the similar base, middle, top kind of articulations. Next slide, please. And all of these kind of illustrate some of the similar details that I talked about in the color elevations. This is on Dahlia, which shows the 4 building stepping, which is going to be our direction for anywhere where we have 2 or 3 feet of drop in a 4-unit townhome. We're going to be directing it as an 8-inch stepping of the units. The end elevations, again, like here on the right where we show 2 windows on the 3rd floor, 2 windows on the 2nd floor, and a single window on the 1st floor. There, the blind window works well, but we might forego them on the top floor and maybe even on the area on the left per some of the discussions, which I think makes sense as well. The next slide, please. Similar comments, similar here. We're treating the terrace as a solid railing element, which I think is very appropriate. And we need to wrap that around the corner to not have the railings on the side, so that we have a parapet condition on all sides of these terraces, which adds to the top floor or the third floor massing, which relates to the overall articulation of the 3 and 4 building elements. So you go to the next, please. This just illustrates some of the reflection on the detailing and the brick colors and whatnot as it relates to the standard brick palette that was developed as a part of the master plan and in the design guidelines. And we're specifically picking elements out of that grouping. Next slide, please. This just shows more of the articulation, shows some of the framing around the windows in brick, then the 3/3 grouping in the sort of tan color. It's not white like shows in the drawing. It's shown over here as tan color 72. Then where we have the railing on the top floor, we're actually thinking that would end up being a solid parapet, not a railing. Next, please.
So I think I'd like to take it from here for a minute.
Yeah.
Our landscaping at Walter Reed, our neighbors formed landscaping standards here. We have an extended pollinator type of landscaping that we do. We're held to a 0.4 GAR green area ratio standard, which is the highest in the city. We fully intend to do that. This site will be a whole lot greener than it started out being. And so we have added open green areas as well as significant bioretention in the mews and in other areas along the site to maintain our stormwater on site. Next, please. This is one that maybe Jack would take, and
Sure.
This is part of us trying to respond to staff comments from Mr. Dene, which we really do take to heart.
Yeah, as I said when I was describing the walk around for the projects in the streetscape images, having the brick base be continuous from grade up to second floor as the same brick color as the upper 3 floors, I think works fine. We do have the keystoning of the overall brick on the first floor. Again, it's a detailing that was similar to Building L, but it's also very appropriate to articulate the base of the building, because the base of the building is making all those adjustments to grade, so that the building has a sense of sort of anchored to the site, and so we already have all of that brick articulation there to define the first floor base. So having it be the same brick color would be lovely. The same thing's true for the top floor. So I think, quite frankly, the after image here, we think would be a very handsome building, and would I think be very appropriate for the relationship to building 1 and the articulation there. We do feel that the corner balconies are a nice feature. I think they can be built very, very well and be very long lasting and high quality. The sort of articulation of them as a residential feature we like. I think it softens a little bit the building massing, but it's something that, I mean, there's obvious construction. Those corner balcony elements actually project out about 1'4", 1'1" to 1'4". So we've by having the brick at the top for that top 3.5 feet of our coping parapet sort of element to the top of the building, the brick would then follow through to create the rectangular brick building mass, and then these corner elements are sort of projected out a little bit like mini bays on the corners, and then that's carried through with the brick on the base. So we did feel that was an enrichment to the detailing of the condo building. And so that's why we felt that was appropriate to present to you today. We have created a much, well, we would be, it doesn't show in this drawing, but we would want to, instead of a 1'6" canopy, we would go down to a 1 foot canopy, which is really 8 inches with a 4-inch sort of roof coping that would be set back. And then that would be black, and we would no longer need hangers because it'd be much lighter. So from that standpoint, that would create a sort of a subtle, respectful sort of privacy entrance to the condo building and provide weather protection. But it would definitely be a modest, simplified feature to the building.
Next, please.
Next, please. This is a rhythm study, which I think is better. This is our townhouse 3, which is at the upper end of 13th. And here we're adjusting the articulation of the townhouses in respect to Mr. Denay's critique. Here we're doing A, B, A, B, A, and then adjusting the entrances so it has a sort of consistent rhythm. I think this after vision is far superior and would certainly make the building better.
And we would also welcome further feedback from Mr. Denay if he wants to work through the details with us. So we're definitely open to that. Next, please.
This just, go ahead.
I think we're done with our presentation. We're probably over time by a lot. So I apologize for that. I'd like to thank the board and the staff for incredible attention to Walter Reed. We have the full support of our ANC for this, and we have done meetings with our community about this, and they are strongly supportive. Thank you.
Thank you both for your presentation. Do board members have any questions?
I have a question for Tim.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Tim, when I look at the master plan for Walter Reed, I think what was intended was a sort of gradual sort of, transformation as you go from north to south, from sort of townhouse types to multifamily types into the center. And when I look at the site plan that's being proposed here, I see, and so I think what that would have meant was, multifamily buildings of, I don't know which parcels across the way from this, which is a big multifamily project, and then multifamily buildings also facing that. And this team is proposing putting some townhouses on that street and then sort of turning the corner with the multifamily. Yeah, that's the slide. Do you have any comments about that, or did you all think about that relative to the master plan?
Yes. Are you asking Tim?
I actually don't.
I'm asking Tim, please.
Yeah, no, I actually don't have a comment about it. I think that it's acceptable. I mean, I think setting up 4-story rows of houses is comparable to the multifamily that we're getting here. I think your point is that it could have been a still larger building, maybe going half the block or the entire block. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that that's preferable. I think the rules, quote unquote, all that apply, both the zoning and the master plan, small area plan, allow for variability within the plan, and we don't have any objection to it.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Any other questions?
Can I just address the issue of the different colors and materials and that sort of thing? Just take one more crack, one more crack at it.
Sure.
So if we look at any of these is fine. So if we look at the an elevation of the multifamily buildings, I think the question comes to mind: what is the problem that the, let's say, 2-color scheme is trying to fix? And I think that there are 2 issues, two things that it's trying to address. One is that we have 4-story buildings that are, fairly long, And one issue is just that you might not want to just use one color because that's kind of relentless. Second thing is that at 4 stories and kind of long, you might want to de-emphasize the horizontality of the buildings and have something that sort of balances it with verticality. So far, so good. They've suggested that, but what I'm suggesting is that if you look at an elevation, the simplicity of just having certain verticals balance the horizontality is kind of broken down by suddenly having these different fields in different locations and of different widths of a contrasting color. So in other words, you kind of have to set the pattern before you break it in very deliberate ways. And here it's you've got this sort of symmetrical 3-part, corners and center porches is one motif that's going on. And then you've got this other motif of these panels that are inset, and sometimes they're next to the porches and sometimes they're independent. And I think the pattern starts to fall apart. The other thing is that with a contrasting base, you're not balancing the horizontality of the buildings. You're reinforcing the horizontality of the buildings. You're essentially making you read what could be a taller field of red brick as more stunted. And what that does is, and the base is trying to adjust, as Mr. Borman suggested, to the different grades around the buildings. And what highlighting its distinction from the rest of the building does is really focus on your eye on where it might not adjust so well to the grades in some places as it does in others. So, the way we look at it is it would be better for the corner porches to kind of be incorporated back into the overall pattern, and have these sort of panels with the ganged windows stand out as the counterpoint, along with the cornice, and of course the porch slabs themselves are going to stand out in some fashion.
So,
We are
so
very
Tim,
open to that, by the way. So we are supportive.
Can we go to the last slide where we
well,
actually?
I want to make sure I understand what Tim's saying. Are you saying
Okay.
not to push the porches out, but to make them coplanar with the body of the building?
Make
Well,
them brick, maybe. I think that
Yeah.
there's a historical example. There's a historic precedent in the samples that Trace Reese pulled, where porches are added to a brick building, but with having
Yes.
these open porches and be the cement panel and connected in the same color as the cornice and the base, it makes the brick feel thin and applied, and like this is not a brick building onto which porches and decorative spandrel panels are applied. And so I think what I hear, and Tim, let me know if it's not correct, but the difference in the after, although I don't like the porches on the corner on this one either, is this feels like a more solid masonry building onto which the decorative framing and spandrel panels and the decorative center panel bay, I think is successful and mimics some of the historic precedent, and it works successfully. Otherwise, it doesn't really align with some of the precedent directives of the standards for the Walter Reed that have been established.
I think
Yeah,
Gretchen,
I
slide
agree with-
5.
I
Slide
agree
5
with
has
that.
those pictures.
Whoops.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Can you go to
that's what I was
slide
looking
5?
at.
Yeah, slide
Because
5.
I think they're important.
Top
Yeah,
middle
they're
picture,
important.
slide 5.
The
Shows that
top,
exact.
yeah, the top picture and then the second one from the left on the bottom. I
Yeah,
think
they,
they're
Yeah.
both. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. I have a different
It's different in
presentation
that
here.
oh, you
package.
just
If you
passed
go
it
It's the
back,
one that's called Walter Reed Design Guidelines is the one I'm looking at in the
Yeah, me
file.
too.
It's slide 2 in the presentation.
Right.
Whoop, right there. Yeah.
There, yeah.
Yeah, the two in the middle, on the upper middle and the bottom middle to the right of the proportion drawing are both Walter Reed buildings, are they not? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's an excellent point you're making, Gretchen, about whether the building reads as a brick building or not. And it does occur to me as well that I'm having a little trouble with the center panels because they seem, the alternation between the brick bays, between the porches and the non-brick bays seems arbitrary to me in the elevation. And I wonder, one of the things that is interesting about these two precedents is that, there's, go to the elevation drawing here. There's an elevation of the multifamily building. Yeah, maybe you could zoom in a little bit on that.
There's one
also.
right after.
Go to slide.
Yeah,
there
that's
you
good.
go.
That's good.
There you go.
So what's troubling to me is the space between the bay on the left where the porch is, and you get a little bit of brick, and then you get the sort of spandrel bay, and then you get something that looks like a pier, and then windows, and then another pier. I think this spacing has not worked out well at all. And I think that if you look at those examples we were looking at before, you could actually read the thickness of the brick and the width of it relative to the whole brick wall. And I'm wondering is if a profitable study would be to maybe have one of those spandrel groups in the center of that, maybe with 4 windows, flanked by the 2 window thing, so you have strong centers in those pieces. It would likely then help the entrance be rationalized as under the spandrel bay rather than the brick bay. I just find the spacing of these elements not consistent with some of the Walter Reed things we've seen earlier, and I think it seems arbitrary to me.
Yeah, so maybe central.
the,
Oh, sorry, Monique. I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's the part that I'm struggling with the most, that the corners, the precedents in the guidelines all show these solid masonry corners.
Yeah.
And here we've got corners that are carved away and they're lighter in color, so they're trying to feel lighter, and it's completely opposite of what the guidelines suggest. But also the relationship of that corner to then the panel, the inset panel is just it's not working at all. So you get this really thin sliver of brick that again takes away from the solidity of the corners of the building. Yeah. So all of that needs to be revisited.
Yeah, it's almost like that center on this front elevation, that center bay, if it were repeated, one in from the balcony bays, get rid of the balcony bays, make those brick with windows, and have that be a center bay. So there'd be 3 center bays with this little tripartite solution with the spandrels in between. And then one of them could be the entrance. That is more similar, I think, to the vocabulary of the historic district.
Yeah, and I think just to underscore that, I think a lot of these buildings at Walter Reed, the historic ones, they're not kind of urban wall buildings like long, parts of a block. They're kind of neoclassical in origin. They have strong centers and things. And I think maybe a little bit of study of that, a more rigorous study of that would help these. I think this is a good first shot at it, but I think it could be ever so much better and relate much better to Walter Reed.
Yeah, I guess what I'm kind of struggling with is that there's not really a hierarchy here. I kind of understood the discussion of, the 3-part vertical organization, but I guess I just want to be clear. I don't think it's a question of kind of moving the balconies around, moving the spandrel panels around. When I look at the kind of prevailing condition within Walter Reed, there's clearly, I would say most buildings have this kind of, very typical 5-part classical order. And I'm not suggesting that you have to do that, but again, you look at these buildings and they're just kind of boxes with the Walter Reed details kind of arrayed across them, but it doesn't capture kind of the essence of how the sites were planned, I guess, for these buildings.
I guess too, if you're paying for brick on a building, let's make it look beautiful and sturdy and worthy, and not it feels thin on these elevations the way it's applied.
Yeah, it feels very much like a
I agree.
veneer.
If you're gonna spend the money on brick, get a big bang for it.
Yes, agree.
It's just the way even this, if somehow one could rationalize the balconies at the ends, they create such strong centers between them, such strong fields between them that don't seem organized in any kind. I think Bill's right. They're not hierarchically conceived yet, and they need that.
That's why I want to pull
Right.
them in. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
Are there, so we were, I guess we were in deliberation. Any other thoughts
Well, I would
about
say
it?
that the townhouses to me seem fine. I mean, given the fact that the multifamily building across the street is 3 stories and the perspective, shows that the height of the townhouses and the multifamily buildings seem in congruence with each other, seems okay to me. I think these could be rather nice. Is that window, I guess is the question for the architect, is that a brick mold around the windows there?
Yes,
Can't
that's
quite tell.
yeah. It's a 2.5 to 3 inch brick mold that frames the window, and then you have the window unit set into that. So
Good. Okay. That's nice to see. Don't always see that.
don't
But
be
that's
evil.
good.
The thing I wondered, Matt, about these was only the proportion of the cornice, and if it's even needed, like could that just be a brick or a metal that matches the brick?
Well, again, I would go back to Walter Reed itself and look. I mean,
It doesn't
the
have to be.
cornice, the cornices that are there that don't match, that aren't brick, are rather more pronounced.
Yeah.
This one seems a little wimpy to me, to tell you
Yeah.
the truth.
Yeah.
Are those true Muntin windows, a true Muntin, or do they have an exterior Muntin on them, or what?
Yes.
Wow.
Simulated divided light.
They're STLs.
We have tried to be consistent with all of the lessons we have learned throughout Walter Reed and taken those to heart, even though they cost us a significant premium. We probably don't see in the sales prices, but we understand that's part of Walter Reed. And so we tried to come prepared, and these townhouses are actually quite consistent with other townhouses at Walter Reed. And so if you would like us to have the cornice be a little bit thicker and the brick a little bit less, I would be very deferential to that and happy to work with it with Mr. Dene to give us guidance on what the right proportionality is there, and that would be fine. I'd also like to make one other comment, and it goes to board member Bell's prior comment about multifamily. For all intents and purposes, the multifamily market has been dead for 2 years. It's likely to be dead for another 2 years. And so as developers, we work through alternatives to that. We have a home builder here, and it's kind of a nice benefit because we've been able to turn a significant number of units on the site into home ownership units. We already have well over 1,000 rentals, probably close to 1,500. We'll be closer to 2,000 when we're done. So it's a very, very big presence here. And so the balance of home ownership, especially including affordable units, we didn't mention it, but that does include affordable units, is really important. We have a national home builder, NVR, who is able to produce these buildings to a very high standard of quality. They've already done that on site. I encourage you to come down and have a look because they're really, really terrific what they've already built. So we appreciate your understanding of that and the flexibility of our own master plan to accommodate it. I'd like to think through the condo buildings and the guidance and figure out the best way to meet that with Mr. Dene. I think we get really good guidance from him as well as from you. And so please know that we are committed to working together, and we've already gotten very strong guidance from EHT traceries, and we pay attention to them, and they've guided us well. And so we're happy to work through those things together, and try and find the right product to meet the site. So thank you.
All right. So, any final questions for the applicant before we officially deliberate? All right. Then I think we've said quite a lot about the condo buildings, and I think we're all in agreement that more work needs to happen with that, in concert with Tim Dene. I'd like to see that come back to us once the revisions are made. The townhouses less so, but just want to make sure. I see Matt's head nodding, but just want to see if others agree that we are fine with the townhouses with slight modifications.
Yeah, I think they look actually quite simple and could be very, very nice. I think, you know, and the only comment I would have is Tim wants to take detail off the top, and, you know, it's like, gee, they have some detail at the top, you know. I don't get that, but, you know, I mean, I think that by and large, they're ready. The cornice could be a little better, I suppose, but, you know, they could work on it.
Okay. So yeah, I trust that they could work that out. So what I would suggest then is, or what I'll put on the table then is a motion to support the concept for the townhouses and ask that the condo design be brought back to us once revisions are made based on the board's feedback and work with staff. And then I'll ask for a second.
I would second that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. Thank you. Thank you all for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. We can move on to Foggy Bottom to 2510 I Street. Is staff ready to present?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tim Dene again. This is a revised concept for new construction project that the board first reviewed in April. The board then unanimously supported 2 stories only as compatible with the character of the historic district, conditioned upon reconsideration of the type and color of brick and ensuring concealment of utility meters from public view. The applicant had agreed at the hearing to the conditions, but the brick proposed even today is not red or not necessarily red. Rather, it's an indeterminate color that is intended to be painted white. While we don't feel that that's ideal in sort of a Victorian neighborhood, we do have to observe that many of Foggy Bottom's historic houses have unfortunately been painted over the years, and we cannot regulate the painting of those or the painting of this building after it's constructed. The building has been revised to be not quite 2 stories. A generally 2-story house now has a setback penthouse for access to a roof deck and an additional bedroom. The penthouse would be set to the rear of the building, and it would be about 13 feet deep and go from side to side. HPO repeats its recommendation that the building be just 2 stories for the reasons discussed in April, namely that Foggy Bottom and this block in particular are predominantly 2-story in height. The problems with the proposed penthouse are its overall height and the fact that it extends forward of the 3-story rear addition at 2512 I Street next door. We think that provision can be made for a roof deck via a hatch, but if one were to pursue an access pop-up, it could require very little height or footprint if you remove the bedroom from the plan. So HPO reiterates its recommendation that the board approve a concept for a house of 2 stories only as compatible with the character of the historic district, with the utility meters to be concealed rather from public view. Thank you.
Okay. Is the applicant ready to present?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Good morning. My name is Will Tays, Managing Principal with Tays Warren Architects, and I appreciate the opportunity to revisit this project. Overall, not a lot of the project has changed. For the ground and second floors, we're still proposing a 2-story house in the Foggy Bottom Historic District. If we could go to the next slide, please. The image on the left is where we were in April with a much more, a larger third floor addition. The image on the right is the revised footprint, which sets it back from, originally we were about 24 feet. I think now we've set it back to about 44 feet. There was some discussion at the board, and while we didn't have graphic examples, I think maybe we all, or certainly I and Mr. Denay left that meeting with a different impression of what the board may or may not favor. And so I think there was some discussion of an ability to get to the third floor. There was some discussion of some sort of penthouse structure, although technically it would be a third story in the building code, to provide access to that upper level roof deck. And so we went back to the drawing board and revisited the design and really set the existing structure much further back. If this, if the adjacent property were built on the face of the property line, this addition would be very invisible, but it's not. And because the building to the west is set so far back from the property line, there is a portion of visibility that you can see here on the right-hand side. You can go to the next slide. So this is where we were in April. That shows about that 24-foot setback. Next slide, please. And then this is that in the same building section, but where we are today, that shows that 44-foot setback. The idea is that we're providing enough space for the elevator and the stair to extend up there, and then there's a small room at the top that does go the full width of the property. Next slide, please. And I think this condition, again, articulates where we are in terms of the design of that penthouse at third level, where on the left was where the original in April, and then on the right is where we are today. I think Mr. Denay pointed out that we are still proud of the adjacent building to the east on the right-hand side, but we've significantly reduced the size of the addition and the roof deck. Next slide. I think there was some question about the brick, and this is a detail I think we're still continuing to work with. Originally, we proposed a glazed white brick, which we felt the staff and board, I think, felt was not an appropriate choice. We went back and we're looking at a face brick that would be painted or really a lime wash to sort of be more consistent with the fabric of the neighborhood. If the board felt strongly or staff felt strongly that a non-painted or non-coated brick were more appropriate, we'd be happy to work through some alternatives there. So we're requesting that any discussion of the brick was a matter that we could work out with staff. I think the principal issue here is the third floor design. Next slide, please. The other point I just wanted to clarify is that we are proposing an areaway. The areaway leads to a lower level, which is an accessory apartment, which is a permitted use in this zone. There is a provision in that areaway to locate our electrical and gas meters so that they're not visible from a public right away. And I know there are some questions and comments in the record from adjacent neighbors about the zoning, which, while it's not a concern necessarily of the Historic Preservation Review Board, there is a provision that does allow accessory apartments. And there's a provision that specifically speaks to how you get to those accessory apartments, and part of that overlaps with the historic HPRB review. And so there is a pattern of cellar entries on the street, and so we're consistent with that. And that cellar entry is providing the additional ability to conceal the meters, which is, I think, from a design perspective, a much more favorable approach than simply putting them on the side of the building. Next slide. And again, I think this, just the overall site plan illustrates again how far setback we are from the street. There is, as Tim had pointed out, we're still slightly proud of the building to the west, but we've radically changed, we've really, I wouldn't say radically perhaps, but we've really pushed back that third floor penthouse piece to be as minimal as possible. And with that, I would turn it over to the board with questions.
All right, anyone have questions?
Yeah, I guess I have a question. So the interior plans show that there is an elevator to access, I guess, all floors of the property, maybe just the upper floors. I'm wondering if, in accordance with staff recommendations to remove that third story in its entirety, is there an overrun there, or would it just sit flush with the top of essentially what's the second story?
I would sit generally flush with the top of it. It's a residential elevator that doesn't have the kind of traditional overrun that a commercial elevator does.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. We don't have anybody registered to speak on this application today, so if there are no questions, is the board ready to deliberate? And if so, I'll ask board members to turn on your cameras. I think the biggest question here is this comparison on the screen and whether the extent of visibility of this third floor is acceptable as slightly visible, given the unique condition of this block with the neighboring setback.
I'm okay with it. You know, I think they've done a good job of trying to get what they're seeking and at the same time meet what we've asked them to meet. And I think that this will be quite minimally visible. I think if those houses there were at the line of the other houses, obviously we wouldn't be having this conversation. But I find this to be a reasonable solution and not something that would violate in principle or would compromise in principle the reading of the building in its historic configuration.
Yeah, I would agree. Others?
It's not this view that sells me on it, but there's the street view. Going back to Matt's original comment about perspective views, that one that sells me on it, because this looks like it's not so on the left it's an addition on top of building. On the right, it could be a mid-block building, right? So you wouldn't know that it's on top of building.
Yeah,
and the large part of
I had the same thought. Yeah.
Yeah, the larger part of the historic building is intact, right? And so we're not building over the part of that, which is consistent with other decisions that we've made. But that said, even if they could push it back farther, that would be great.
Always looking for that extra couple of inches there.
No, you can't blame me for asking.
Sure.
Like maybe they shorten the there's that little parapet fin that sticks out at the top of the roof. Maybe that gets a little shorter, a little more blunt.
Or even that it might be the same color.
Yeah,
that would help too.
Yeah,
so it doesn't call out as much attention to itself. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I would just add the very minor comment that I don't particularly mind the painted brick. I think even if it wasn't necessarily the historic condition, I think it does seem to be the prevailing condition in the neighborhood, in the historic district. And so I think it broadly would be compatible.
Okay. All right, then I will make a motion that we support the revised concept with the minor comments that the board has made for the applicant to address with staff as they move forward, and ask for a second.
Second.
Okay. Everyone all at once. Yes. All right. Okay, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Great, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, and moving on to Anacostia. We get Amanya back to review 1232 Talbert Street.
Yes, looks like we are almost ahead of schedule. Good job.
Almost.
So we are in the Anacostia Historic District at 1232 Talbot Street Southeast. The owner, Forrest Hayes, has prepared plans by architect Jonathan Kuhn to seek conceptual design for the alteration and an addition at the rear of the property located on a corner lot at Talbot Street and Mount View Place. Talbot Street, the property is a two-story with a porch framed house constructed in 1891. It's clad in an older vinyl siding that covers potentially the original clapboard, but we haven't done any exploratory work on the property yet. It has a prominent full porch that wraps around the side, and it's one of the earliest buildings on the block. It's set on a large raised berm, and it retains its colonial revival features with the main entrance surrounded with transom, side lights, and simple entablatures. So the property has been vacant for several years and is exhibiting various levels of deterioration. The project is calling for the restoration of the siding back to its original wood siding and constructing a two-story addition on the rear. The proposal will demolish approximately 23 feet of the existing building. The two-story addition will sit above the basement level with the foundation that now will extend to the extent of the front of the porch to accommodate a basement level. The addition will be clad in a hardy siding, so that's what you would see on the rear inside. And it will be capped by a side gable roof that sits approximately 2 feet taller than the existing gable roof. The new roof will be clad in an asphalt shingles, similar to what's currently there, and will be set back from the front facade approximately 18 feet with the 4-foot setback along the east elevation. The demolition includes the chimney and the entire rear wall. A significant portion of the side porch and the cellar foundation will also be demolished but rebuilt. And the plan calls for all of the windows and doors to be replaced. In reviewing projects in this historic district, the Talbot Street has been included in our expansion district. The board has been consistent in requiring that the additions be subordinate to the house that they're added to. This project has worked with me, and we've reduced the project size, or the project has reduced in size a lot. This specific iteration focuses on the existing property and not pushing into the lot. So they take the roof, and they have decided to increase the size by just demolishing the rear and increasing the height of the property. HBO has recommended that the roof be lowered to be a bit more subordinate to the existing roof, and that they work on reducing the cellar foundation so that it's not prominent to the front facade. HBO is recommending that the board consider the following findings, including adding where the utility meter box should be located, as well as including a demolition plan that examines the condition of the portion to be demolished. The applicant will discuss with you their purchase of the property and where they are with it, as far as exploring how much of the property needs to be demolished and rebuilt based on just levels of deterioration that they've seen from the exterior. And once they've determined that, we can have a more robust conversation about retaining more historic fabric. And so I'll turn it over to the applicant to talk about the property and where they've gotten so far with that portion, as well as our comments.
Good morning, members of the board. Thank you, Imania, for that wonderful presentation. I thank you for the opportunity to allow us to introduce you to the Nikki 1, to what we're calling our project at 1232 Talbot Street Southeast on the corner of Talbot and Mount View. My name is Forrest Hayes, and I'm the president of Miller Beach Development. I also mentioned that another member of our team, in addition to our architect, Jonathan Kuhn, Ronnie Slammin, our development consultant, is also on the line to answer any questions that are outside of my purview. What you're looking at here is the front facade, and the next picture you see the southern side of the building. The next picture you're looking at is the rear of the building. And then we're also showing a picture of the east side of the building, which is up on a hill. Actually, the third picture is the north side of the home. And you'll notice that there's a car there, which is sitting in the existing driveway, which will remain, that curb cut will remain to make way for off-street parking. I should say that the rent amount, or the affordability amount, will be market rate. What I like to refer to this type of a project is workforce development, meaning that this is intended to be at 80 to 100% of the area median income, and typically housing our teachers, our firemen, our policemen, our DC government workers, federal workers, and the like, given its proximity to public transportation. I'll also mention that in terms of our community outreach, thus far we have presented to the executive committee of the ANC Commission. I've had conversations with Ms. Greta Fuller, though she is still setting up a meeting for so that we can present to her entire group. I've had conversations and in-depth conversations with ANC Commissioner Robin McKinney, and also I met via phone with Micah Winograd, who is the head of one of the neighborhood community groups. I think it's also important to mention that this project, it will be of special note, given the fact that Miller Beach is in partnership with the Amazon Corporation as part of a accelerator program that we were selected for, to ensure that this project is done at a very, very high level, and even has some of the green and sustainable technology elements included in the development. Now, with that, I think I will turn it over to Jonathan as we move through the more technical slides. And after his presentation, if you have questions, Jonathan and I and Ronnie are available. Jonathan?
Good afternoon, everyone. Jonathan Kuhn, the architect for the project. I think Amania covered everything, in good detail about what's being proposed here. One thing I did want to comment that she had mentioned is that we submitted for an interior demolition permit, to her point, to expose with the permit to expose, more of the existing conditions. It's in really bad shape everywhere, all floors, so that we can do a structural assessment, see what's able to be saved and salvaged as we move forward. That permit's been reviewed and approved. It just hasn't been issued yet, so it's still processing through the DOB. I think it's worth talking about a little bit about the demolition that is proposed and what's being referred to as an addition for the project. Again, this is a single family home. It is being converted to a two-family. Some of the demolition that was described at the rear of the house, in part is to accommodate the layouts for the 2-unit, but also for the larger project for the property, which will be the future, and we'll call it phase 2, to allow for us to meet zoning requirements for property lot size, both width and overall land area square footage. So that's just a side note to some of the demolition being proposed. As far as the additions are concerned, again, this gets into the proposed layouts, fitting the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, livable space in the 2 units, so that they're pretty equal in size, but also hopefully targeting, what would be acceptable and supportive in this market. Imani had shared before about the staff report having to do mostly with the roof lines at the back. We're introducing the partial addition. We will address those. We've started looking at it, but I was hoping to hear more from the board today and from these discussions as to taking the next best steps so that we can proceed accordingly. Beyond that, that's the project in summary. We can go slide by slide here. Thank you. So here you have a side-by-side of the existing and proposed site plans. Next slide. This is the cellar and first floor existing demolition plans, indicating the extent of demolition. You can see a lot of the interior walls being taken out. And again, as discussed, the rear wall that currently, as you can see with the property line shown there in the house, things are skewed a little bit with respect to the property line and to the building itself. Next slide. This is the second floor in the roof plan. You can see here the extent of the roof area demolition. Again, some of that is in part because we're proposing a partial second floor addition that eats into a little bit of the existing roof. But again, this is to allow for more square footage, usable square footage at the second floor. Next slide, please. Here you have the front elevation with the porch, which will be staying intact, that wraps around to the north elevation. And again, here depicted with the elevation there on the north, you can see the areas at the second floor that we're proposing to demo, again, to in part rebuild and then expand upon at the second floor, and then how that impacts the existing roof. Next slide. The top elevation is also what we're calling the rear elevation. This is the one that's, again, that I touched on, that will be demoed and rebuilt, but with the footprint being adjusted a little bit. Again, this is for accommodating future development on the property. And the south elevation there, depicting again from a side elevation how much of the rear is being demoed. And you can see the roof, how it steps down at that rear portion and what parts we're touching there. Next slide, please. These are the proposed floor plans at the cellar and first floor. Graphically, we're indicating hatching that indicates new walls. It's a solid hatch, where existing walls are a cross hatch. You can see, especially at the cellar level, the existing is just a partial cellar. We're proposing to expand upon that, pushing out the walls to corners and to include area under the front existing porch. The first floor is really staying within the existing, but some with reconfiguration again, so that allowing for the arrangement of 2 units. So both entrances occur at the first floor. You come up the front steps, there's a door straight ahead for unit 1. If you continue around the porch, there's a door that leads into unit number 2. Both here having their kitchen and living spaces on this floor, the cellar floor being bedrooms, bathrooms, and family area that go with unit 1. Next slide, please. The second floor here, again, same thing graphically of comparing new proposed walls and existing. On the left side of the second floor plan, that's where we've expanded, not outside of the base footprint, but of this compared to the second floor existing. Here, again, these are bedrooms, bathrooms for unit number 2. And on the left side there is the proposed roof plan. And to what Imani had referred to, you can see the turn gable roof towards the back, and the page left in the upper portion, the new roof that we need to look at again to, I guess, reduce the scale of it and keeping it secondary to the primary existing roof. Next slide, please. These are the proposed elevations. The west elevation is primarily staying intact. Again, this is the front porch and entrances to the unit, same window arrangement and siding. The north elevation, the second floor, again, you can see towards the back there, that's where the partial addition is occurring, and the turn gable roof line that's in question that we will revisit. The wraparound porch staying intact and in place, and some of the cellar level called foundation walls being exposed, which they currently are as well. Next slide, please. The east elevation of the rear of the building. This is the new wall being built here. There are no windows being proposed. Again, this is a look ahead to phase 2 that will this face will be a face online once we get to phase 2 and able to break up the property. So that's why you're not seeing any windows at that rear elevation. And in the south elevation is maintaining windows that are currently in place and then adding what you see is a window well at the cellar for the expanded cellar for bedroom use, and then windows above. And again, you see the turn gabled new proposed roof in this picture, which again, we will revisit. Next slide. That's everything. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions from board members?
I guess I have a couple of comments, not so much questions or observations. So I guess firstly, thanks to Mr. Hayes and Mr. Kuhn for the presentation here. I will say that when the materials were provided to the board before the meeting today, I had a little bit of a struggle just to understand what was going on with this project. And then when I read the staff report, it said that much of the building would be demolished. When I looked at the drawings, it almost looked like a brand new building graphically being presented. So there was a little bit of a disconnect there. And, you know, after I heard from Mr. Kuhn here in regards to how the representation of what is existing and what is new, I might suggest that maybe it would be better to have a higher contrast between the new graphically and what is existing, maybe a pure line for the existing as opposed to the hatch. I don't know, but just in regards to how it was reading, that was a little bit of a disconnect here. I think definitely the recommendations from the staff report, I would concur with, especially in documenting the existing building and condition, so a better evaluation can be made as to why certain parts of the building are being demolished, so that the case for that is clear.
Can I turn that into a question, Patrick?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So we keep with questions. Just, are you all prepared to provide that level of detail to us? Because I think that is going to be necessary. Amania pointed it out in her staff report. We need to better understand why so much demolition is happening and the extent of demolition, as Board Member Williams has pointed out, based on the confusion of the drawing.
But I can answer part of that, Marnik and Patrick. Graphically, we can certainly highlight it differently. We could, include color coding, to make it pop a little bit more, especially for HPRB presentation. So that's absolutely something that we can do. As far as the extent of the demolition, I'll start with the interior. To what Forrest was touching on about, the intent of the project, for housing, workforce development housing specifically, is to get, 2 units out of this as compared to being a single family home. So to make the layouts workable, and providing the spaces, it takes a lot of rearrangement to the interior. We're hoping once we have the demo permit and we're, doing surgical demo, again, more to exposing the framing and other conditions that are there, we can understand even better what condition, like floor framing. I know, been through many historic districts and projects, and looking to save, interior framing, understand those procedures and, why that's in place for it is. But to answer the question, like, that's the reason for the amount of the demolition being proposed. Like you can see here with the cellar floor plan, the cellar is a partial cellar in comparison to, the footprint of the house above. So we're looking to expand upon that to gain more living space.
I could also add, and Jonathan provided a perfect segue. The market is calling for 3-bedroom, split level housing opportunities, and we think that this opportunity to renovate or reposition a historic home while keeping the character, because it's so important, but we can also provide the level of housing that the workforce needs, particularly in those areas that are near public transportation. The other thing that I will add is, one of the reasons that we are doing the interior demo is so that a structural engineer, and maybe even you all, Imanya was mentioning, you might want to do a quick tour, that we can, number one, remove an inordinate amount of clutter and debris out of the house and expose the necessary areas so that a structural engineer can provide his take on exactly what should and cannot be demolished given the plans that we have. And when I say debris, I mean they're old pianos and things of that nature. You couldn't even walk around in there. Lastly, I'll say, if any of you have seen the property since we acquired it, and Imanya mentioned it been vacant for years, we have totally secured the property so that no one can enter that property, and we've maintained the grass, and we've already taken a great deal of care to improve the physical conditions of the property, even while it's at this stage of development. So I hope that's an indication to you of the level of professionalism and conscientiousness that we will bring to this project with your direction and support, hopefully.
Sure. Marnie, did you want to?
I sort of got lost in all of that, but what we were really asking for was just the structural evaluation. So at the end of the day, we're going to need that in order to make a determination. Did you have any other follow-up questions, Patrick?
No, actually.
Okay.
I would just say concur with the staff report.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have questions?
I was wondering, in the testimony, they said there had been some conversation both with the ANC and with HAPS, but I don't see any letters or anything in the files.
So HAPS is ready to speak. Greta's on the line, I see.
Oh, okay.
And I think Camille has registered. I don't see him on yet, but he may be as well.
Okay.
So we'll hear from
perhaps,
them
I guess,
shortly.
if the maybe it's the ANC hasn't had a chance to meet or something yet to develop a formal response or letter, but if the applicants could convey the nature of any conversations they've had so far in a little bit more detail with both of those groups, that would be helpful to us.
Sure. Well, would you like me to allow Ms. Fuller to go first, or you want me to answer that question first?
You could answer it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think it was 2 weeks ago, I was afforded the opportunity to present the project to the ANC Executive Committee. That was what was on the schedule. And I've had several conversations and shared the plans with Commissioner Robin McKinney. She has indicated as recently as yesterday that I should come back to the full body and allow them to vote. And at that time, they could, if they support the project, they could generate a letter. But I've certainly had numerous conversations with Commissioner McKinney, and I did present to their executive committee, which is what availed itself in terms of opportunity given their schedule. I've also had conversations with Mr. Micah. I shared plans with Micah, Greta, and Commissioner McKinney. So these same plans you're looking at, I have shared with them. Greta is working to schedule a meeting with her group. There's been at least one on the schedule that did not come into being, but I'm certainly eager to sit with them. And Micah is putting together a group of community members. I believe we're going to meet on Monday. It couldn't work out for this week. So
Okay.
I believe we have a firm schedule for Monday.
And Mr. Hazen, having those initial conversations, have you had any initial comments, or has anyone made any things, comments to you about what they liked or don't like, or any questions that they have?
I don't want to, speak for other people, but I've gotten a good feeling. I think Greta is, I think I've probably had less feedback from her because she's very discriminating, and she she really is taking a good look at things. Micah has not, he's given me a good impression, but he doesn't want to speak without having the entire community have an opportunity. But I do feel very comfortable with the level of engagement we've had with Commissioner McKinney, in that she arranged for me to meet with the executive committee, and she's done other things to help us to connect with the community. And I might add that Ms. Fuller, former Commissioner Fuller, is the one who introduced me to Robin and Micah. So we've gotten a great deal of support from these three leaders, and we look forward to meeting more members of the community as the project moves along.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Great. Then with that, I will ask that we move to testimony so that we can hear from Ms. Fuller, and Camille as well if he's on. But Greta, are you ready to speak?
Yes.
Welcome, and you can make your statement.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Actually, I'm sitting in my car because I was in Anacostia Park getting paper shredded. But I didn't want to miss this meeting. Thank you today for having this meeting. I'm going to be very honest. I think that this project is not ready for the board. I have so many questions. I was not able to meet with them. I know Jonathan and I know Forrest. I've worked on projects with them. As a matter of fact, I worked on Jonathan with 1347 Mapleview Place, which is Little Green, and some other projects that he worked on with the LaFont Trust. I've also worked with Mr. Hayes at what we call the Big K site, which is known as Mapleview Flats. So they're very aware how passionate the community is about their historic properties. I just think that they met with the executive board, but they didn't have a general body meeting to meet on. So they have no support from the ANC. They spoke to Micah because I've spoken to him as well. And he has a civic association, this Talbot Street. They have an association. I can't think of their formal name right now, but they're very involved and they don't understand. And as far as HAPS, we've never met with them. We have had a missed meeting, but we still couldn't understand the information that was provided. We got 2 iterations of this project. One had 2 large buildings on it with a house, and then there's this project with a house. So I guess we're here today to talk about the project with the house. And my concerns about it is I've been here many, many years, and how much are you removing or demolishing that this is not going to actually be a raise? How long is this structure? 23 feet is extensive to remove. I wholeheartedly agree with the staff report. I think they should have went inside, did their report, did ample review of the actual site before they came to the board or came to HAPS or even the ANC or Talbot Street to let them know their findings. I have so many, all of my comments are actually questions. So I'm not going to bring up these questions because it's something that should happen in a meeting between the developer and the community organizations. Like I said before, I'm not gonna keep the board here on this, but I think having this developer find out what's going on inside the structure and coming back to the community and to HPO and then to HPRB is the thing to do. And to be honest, I've seen lots of property in much worse condition than this that have been rehabbed without them being demolished. And one of my major questions is this becoming a raise rather than a demolishing of a certain amount of the house to rehab it. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you heard the comments of HAPS and HPO. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you for that. That definitely helped to give us direction on how we move forward. I do think, given what you've said and what the staff has conveyed, what we've seen, that it makes sense to ask the applicant to go back to the drawing board on this, provide us with the necessary structural evaluation to be able to understand why so much is being demolished. and at the same time ask them to see how much they can actually preserve, if it's possible. Certainly, if it's not, giving us that justification. And then spending more time with HAPS to meet with them, answer their questions, so that they can provide you and us with the appropriate feedback that we appreciate getting from them on cases in this historic district. So unless anyone has anything else they want to convey on this about what you'd like to see when this comes back, we'll conclude on this hearing for today.
Yeah, Marnie, I just had one minor comment, if I could.
Go ahead.
So, taking a look at the drawings, especially the north elevation and the south elevation, I think there are some issues with the proportionality of the fenestration on these facades. What I imagine the original condition would have been is kind of a taller window on the first floor and then kind of a shorter window on the second floor. And I think that's the condition we see on the west elevation, which, you know, my understanding is it just kind of preserves the historic condition. And with these north elevations and also the south elevation, it's if we could go to the south elevation too, which my understanding is it kind of flips that paradigm and it creates kind of almost like a postmodern feeling that is contrary to what I imagine, you know, the original building would have had. So I guess if I could add the comment to the applicant that proportionality should be preserved. I like that they're restoring, you know, the original glazing, putting in windows that are more compatible than maybe what's there now. But if they could kind of rework those proportions, I think that would really help preserve the historic appearance of those facades.
That sounds great. And I trust that that's the level of detail that they would work through with the staff and with Greta in the meetings that they would have once they have them. Because Greta and Camille are really, really good at making sure that what is compatible and details that are typical within the historic district are brought to new developments or preserved.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. Thank you.
That is, that's why that review with them is so necessary. All right. Okay, well, thank you all for today. We have reached our brief break, so we'll take it now, and I think we have just 15 minutes, and actually we're right on schedule. So let's come back at 12:30 and hear our last case.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. It's actually 12:31, and we're ready to resume our afternoon hearings or hearing. We have one case left. Is staff ready to present? It's Amani. No, it's Jack. Are you on? See you. You're muted though.
Sorry about that. I was having some audio difficulties. I couldn't hear
Okay.
anything anyone was saying. So,
Oh, all
um,
right. Well, now
good
we can hear
afternoon,
you.
everyone. The owner here is seeking a concept review for construction of a second-story addition atop an existing garage in the Capitol Hill Historic District. This was previously for the May meeting, but after community input, this was rescheduled for this month. It's behind a brick dwelling that was constructed in 1892, and it has an existing brick garage or regular garage roll-up door. The concept calls for constructing a second-story painted brick addition atop the existing garage. With the new addition, the height of the garage will increase to 20 feet. I believe the previous concept had it being 22 feet. The existing garage will retain its current 6/6 windows and door on the yard side, and the existing garage door will also be retained. An existing door on the east side will be bricked in. The new addition will have a low slope TPO roof, 6/6 double hung windows with arch brick headers, 3 on the alley side and 2 on the yard side, a set of metal stairs on the yard side, and a solid wood door with transom on the yard side. This was also presented at a June 12th BZA hearing and was granted the desired zoning relief for lot occupancy. ANC 6B also supported the application in May. So in my staff evaluation, I said the proposed addition to the garage is compatible in the design with the existing one-story brick structure and also compatible with the character of the Capitol Hill Historic District. The addition retains the garage distinguishable historic features such as existing windows, doors, and brick headers. The concept represents the first two-story addition on this alley. However, this alley does not hold any elevated level of significance, and it does not have a uniform or distinctive context that would make a two-story garage incompatible. The board has previously approved similar projects of two-story garages in Capitol Hill alleys, including on other alleys where no other two-story garages are present. HPO recommends the board find the project compatible with the Capitol Hill Historic District and delegate final approval to staff. So that concludes my report.
Great. The applicant can present.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Very low, Jennifer.
Oh.
We almost can't hear you at all.
Oh, okay. We're moving
So that's
closer. Hi, my name is Jennifer Fowler. I'm the architect on this project. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for such a thorough introduction. That was really helpful. I'm just going to run you through the plans and then kind of highlight the changes that we made from the original filing in response to neighbor concerns. So this is our cover sheet. You can see the front facade on East Street on the top right picture, and then the view of the from the yard of the one-story carriage house on the bottom right. Next slide. And then some additional kind of shots of the alleyscape and the view from the yard of the existing garage and the adjacent garages and rolling doors. Next slide. And this here you see a site plan. You can see the existing footprint of the house, with a landing coming out to the yard. And then the hatched-in area is the second floor that's proposed above the garage. Again, we're keeping the same footprint as the structure below and just extending it up. And we have a new stair and landing coming down to the yard from the second floor. Next slide. And this is a bigger kind of block plan of the alley. Next. Demolition plans, you can see the first floor, we're keeping the existing brick walls. And we are going to be changing out the door, but keeping the windows that are there facing the yard. The door that's on the alley that we're removing, we're taking out really for security reasons, you know, because it is kind of another access point that's not really needed by the clients and it causes a security issue. So that's why we're proposing to fill that in. Next slide. And then this is the new work plan. So again, minimal changes on the first floor. The second floor is really just a family use, bathroom, family room, office space for their use. Next slide. This is the roof plan. And next. So these are the elevations. So the left view is the south elevation facing the house. Again, we've kind of mimicked the brick arches and the window proportions from the existing windows below. And then we have a solid door with a transom leading to the second floor space. And then a metal landing and stairs coming down to the yard. And then the west elevation on the right side of the slide is showing kind of the lower portion of brick that's remaining and then the brick extension above. Next. Left side here, you have the garage elevation from the alley. So we're keeping everything intact below. We did a kind of a row lock header or a band to differentiate the old and the new brick, anticipating that they won't match exactly, but we will be painting it all the same color. And then we've got a double window with a brick arch and then a single window. And on the right, you can see the alley, the portion to the right of the property line that's actually kind of facing public space where the previous door is going to be infilled. So we're going to maintain the arch and kind of leave the opening kind of visible and just inset the brick so we can kind of keep that historical character there. And then we're proposing brick facade on that elevation as well. Next slide. So we did have a lot of feedback from neighbors. We did have some support letters, but we had some opposition as well. We had a meeting with several neighbors that was facilitated by the ANC. And in response, we did make some changes from the original application. And really the things that kind of impact the historic application and the first few items here, which was the concern about character and massing. So we did reduce the height from 22 feet to 20 feet. And we had an attic space for mechanical that we have removed from the plan. We did include brick on all four sides, which we originally were not planning to do that. And we did incorporate the brick arches in the new design. We changed the stair landing slightly, just really out of privacy concerns, but we created a winder at the top so that it kind of drops the landing down somewhat. And we also removed a roof hatch that there was concerns about people using that for entertaining or something. So next slide. So this is just kind of highlighting where the differences are. We removed a window on the yard side as well. Next. So elevations, left is the original filing, and then the right-hand view is the current proposal. Next. And from the yard side, you can see we dropped it the 2 feet. We took out a window at the top floor, and we also changed the door to a solid wood door out of privacy concerns. Next slide. And then we incorporated brick facade on the other alley side view. Next. And same here, we've reduced the height and incorporated brick facade. And that's my presentation. I will leave it open to questions. Thank you very much.
All right. Did you all go before BZA already?
Yes, we did get BZA approval.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that approval happened after you made these changes that you talked about?
Yes, these are in the zoning, in the final plans. And that was on, I think, June 12th was our hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Anyone have questions? Any questions? We do have Beth Purcell registered to speak as a witness today. So if there aren't any pressing questions, then it sounds like there aren't. Although Gretchen, I saw you turn on your camera. Is there something you wanted to ask now?
No, just to shake my head. No, I had no questions.
Okay, all right, perfect. Then we'll hear from Ms. Purcell, and then we can always take final questions before the board deliberates.
Good afternoon, board members. This is Beth Purcell with the Capitol Hill Restoration Society. As noted, the applicant proposes to build a second story over an existing one-story brick garage. The cladding on the elevations will be brick with jack arch double hung windows. The height is now 20 feet, which is within the board's guideline for garages. We believe the design and materials are appropriate. We agree with the staff report, and we believe this project is compatible with the Capitol Hill Historic District. And thank you for considering our comments.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Purcell from the board? All right, then are we ready to deliberate? All right, then I'll ask board members to turn on your cameras. And I can start by saying I'm in support of the staff report. I appreciate the applicant's willingness to listen to feedback from the AMC and community and to respond thoughtfully. And I have no issues.
I agree, and I would move approval.
Okay, all right. Then I will make then I will second your motion since you just moved. And ask for all those in favor to say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Great, then the motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you. And again, welcome to Gabrielle. You made it through your first meeting.
Thank you. It was,
Right.
we started off with a strong one, so thanks so much.
All right, great. Everyone enjoy the holiday next week, and we'll see you at the end of July.
Okay.
Thank everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.